You ever just play a game and think, wow, it's impressive this game is playable at all, but it's still not good enough? Sadly, that's exactly the game we're going to talk about today, Halo Infinite. After the creative director, one of the executive producers, and the head of 343 left the company over the course of development, not to mention the numerous delays, Halo Infinite has finally released, and it's actually good? I'm not gonna pretend it's not, but the truth is Halo is better than good. It deserves better. There are people who will debate 1, 2, and 3 are all some of the greatest games ever made. And sorry, nobody's gonna be saying that about this game except the most delusional fanboys. I didn't even have expectations for this game, but somehow it still managed to disappoint me over the course of the campaign. But before we get into this, let's talk about this video's sponsor. There's a mobile game out there, you may have heard of it. It has over 600 unique champions, constant new daily content to play, and best of all, is completely free. What is that game, you might ask? Oh, it's only Raid Shadow Legends. Check out my link in the description below to download the game to your PC or mobile device. The newest clan boss just released to Raid Shadow Legends is the biggest and most dangerous yet, the Hydra. With 6 heads that all have unique abilities and status ailments, each one is a completely unique boss of their own. If I were you, I'd watch out for the Head of Suffering. It has a special new ability, Pain Link, that allows it to share some of the damage it takes with your champions. The Head of Torment is another fun one. He looks and sounds like something out of a death metal album, and it specializes in using fear to immobilize your team, making you lose turns. And I assure you, the other 4 heads are no slouches. You better bring your best to take on the Hydra. And if that's not enough for you, Raid Shadow Legends is also adding a limited edition champion to the game, esports superstar Simple. Now, being an avid fan of esports myself, I was very excited to see this. And all you have to do is log in for 7 days between now and January 28th, and he's yours. And there's seriously never been a better time to get started. Hit the link in the description or scan my QR code, and you'll get Epic Champion Rector Drath, 200,000 silver, 1 energy refill, 1 XP boost, and 1 ancient shard, and these rewards are only available for 30 days and to new players, so you better grab them fast. So check it out and I'll see you in the game. So of course, as with almost every video on my channel, I like to talk about gameplay first, and thankfully, without a doubt, the gameplay is the best part of this game. Even just the core gameplay mechanics specifically are quite possibly the best in the entire series. And it's not like they're actually that much different from previous games in the series. As you already know, Halo is a shooter with regenerating health and 2 weapons that you swap between and you loot the rest from the battlefield. Pretty common, but Halo pretty much started this trend, so luckily it's still one of the best to use that style of FPS gameplay. I feel like just describing the mechanics doesn't exactly do them justice. I mean, obviously you have other things common to shooters, like sprinting, throwing grenades, melee. A lot of the gun types are pretty standard for video games. Snipers, shotguns, battle rifles, assault rifles, etc., etc. Halo has always been the type of game where it's greater than the sum of its parts. The actual total sandbox and weapon balance is a big part of why people like these games so much. Really, the biggest change to the Halo gameplay is the pacing, because much like Halo 4, sprinting is default, and you can also slide and jump out of a slide to maintain your momentum, which obviously makes the game a bit faster paced. And what makes it even more fast paced, especially if you're on PC, is the grappling hook, which functions a lot like other grappling hooks that have been in modern games. Specifically, Pathfinder's from Apex Legends is very similar to this grappling hook. So having the ability to climb pretty much any ledge adds a lot more verticality to the combat, which is mostly a good thing for sure. Oh yeah, and I can't forget to mention you can actually use the grappling hook to hijack vehicles, and I don't think I need to tell you why that's fun. Honestly, it never gets old. And there's also other equipment, which during the campaign you have all of them equipped at the same time, and you also find these Spartan cores in the open world, which you use to upgrade each of your equipment. Now I mostly just use the grappling hook, but in the linear levels, the threat detector can be pretty useful to be able to see enemies through walls and also see cloaked elites. And there's also a drop shield you can use that you can actually shoot through on your side. And finally, there's a sort of strafe dodge. I barely used that one, but you could probably use it to dodge like incoming skewers or a rocket or grenades or something. And of course, then you have the weapons themselves, which are half familiar to the old games and half new. Now, the new weapons, a lot of them aren't that functionally different. The main differences are in the weapon types, because like other Halo games, you have kinetic weapons and plasma weapons, which you should definitely be familiar with plasma weapons being more effective on shields and ballistics more effective on flesh. But now on top of this, we also have electric weapons and hard light weapons. Electric weapons are able to paralyze enemies, which is obviously extremely effective for some of the weapons, but then you have something like the Disruptor, which seems borderline useless. I think it's the weakest gun in the game. But the shock rifle, by comparison, and also the electric grenade are really good. Then for the hard light weapons, I couldn't really tell anything specific other than they just do more damage and are equally effective on shields and flesh, as far as I can tell. Specifically, the Sentinel Beam, which is another returning weapon, is probably the greatest all-around weapon in the game, at least in campaign. The thing has really far range, is extremely accurate, is more effective against shields than the Plasma Carbine, and also seems to be more effective against flesh than the assault rifle. So the only weakness of the Sentinel Beam was its ammo capacity, which it blew through extremely quickly, but it's safe to say in the last couple hours of the game where they throw them at you like candy, that was one of the only guns I was using. Then the other big part of the Halo sandbox are the power weapons. Of course, the weapons that are basically objectively better than other guns, like a rocket launcher, sniper, the Skewer, which is a new gun, which basically shoots a javelin that is extremely effective against vehicles. And I'm not going to name off every weapon, but you get the point. The only real problem with the game's mechanics is that there's still no dual wielding, even after everybody wanted dual wielding to come back. What the fuck is your problem, 343? Everybody wants dual wielding. Who the hell didn't want dual wielding? And there's weapons in this game that feel like they were made to be dual wielded. Particularly the Sidekick, Mangler, Needler, and Disruptor. All of them feel too weak on their own, except maybe arguably the Sidekick. There should have been fucking dual wielding. So I'd say overall the gunplay is really good. It feels a lot like older Halo games while also being a lot faster paced given the new movement mechanics. But it still feels like Halo, and that was really the main challenge here. It feels like a proper evolution of the original trilogy's mechanics, while avoiding some of the trappings that specifically Halo Reach fell into, and doesn't feel like reskinned Call of Duty like Halo 4. Now here's the problem. Everything else about this game is worse than the mechanics. There is not one other part of this game that lives up to the core gameplay experience. And that's why I would consider this game still a disappointment. Because in the early hours of the game, it really fools you into thinking this is gonna be a masterpiece, but it's really anything but. I honestly don't even know where to begin. Maybe I'll just continue with the best this game has to offer and slowly make my way to the worst. Probably the next best thing are the enemies, which are mostly returning from previous games in the series, as now we have the return of the skirmishers finally from Reach. So pretty much every enemy type that you've seen from Halo 1 all the way to Reach is here. Well, not every enemy type. Notably, the entire Flood faction is missing and there's no replacement for them, which might be a blessing in disguise if 343 had plans to bring back the Prometheans again. So expect to fight a lot of grunts, jackals, brutes, elites, etc., the stuff we've all seen many times. But it's still pretty fun to fight them because back in the day, Bungie pretty much created the perfect combination of enemies to fight with team tactics, so obviously that's still fun when done correctly, in which case, for the most part, this game has done very well. On top of enemies carrying the new weapons, which will mix shit up a little bit, particularly the Ravager is pretty annoying to fight against. It's an energy mortar launcher that can be charged up to create a fire effect that burns over time on the ground. And there's also brutes that have jetpacks that can soak a shit ton of damage. I played the campaign on Heroic, which was more than enough of a challenge. I'd actually argue some of the areas didn't feel play tested, because the game has no problem throwing a shit ton of bullet sponge enemies at you at times, especially any of the mini boss wanted targets that you have to hunt down. They just have too much health. It's not very fun to fight them. Combine this with the fact that some of those areas don't even have any cover, and some of the power weapons can kill the chief in like 2 hits. And yeah, you're gonna have a bad time. And the game has quite a few boss fights that I'd pretty much say the same thing about. There's nothing fun about shooting an enemy with like 5,000 bullets. Even the power weapons barely do any damage to some of these bosses. But all in all, I'd say the encounter design is pretty good, but of course there are some notable exceptions. There's definitely areas of this game that just feel like padding, especially anytime you fight the Sentinels. The game has a habit of only throwing Sentinels at you, and if you're using their own Sentinel beam against them, it is easily the worst encounters in this game. So boring and easy, it's awful. Also, I know they wanted to make hunters a threat again, but the hunters have way too much health in this game, and they spin around way too fast. And yeah, I know exactly why they did it, because obviously you can use the grapple to just swing right around them and shoot them in the back, but now it's almost too difficult to shoot them in the back, because they can just do a 180 while you're swinging like Spider-Man over their head. Definitely a bit of an overcorrection. Now you just gotta spam explosives and hope for the best. But still, I had a fun time fighting the enemies at least 80% of the time, so still a good aspect of the game. The only other real problem more ties directly into the level design, which of course let's talk about next. This is the most middling part of the game. They got it half right and half wrong. Ironically, the linear levels are the parts they got wrong. You know, the thing Halo is famous for? Yeah, I don't think 343 could design a level to save their lives, because almost every real level in this game is a bunch of gray linear corridors broken up by square battle arena rooms. Kinda sounds like another game I shit on in the past that everybody liked. But to give Doom Eternal some credit, it worked for that game, even if I didn't like it. For this game, it sucks. Halo's level design used to be top-notch, especially ignoring the library and arguably 2 betrayals. Halo 1 has top fucking tier level design.
Truth and Reconciliation, Silent Cartographer, Assault on the Control Room, 343 Guilty Spark, and The Maw are all incredibly memorable levels that I'm sure popped into your head instantly as I said their name, because they each have the building blocks of what makes a great level in the Halo formula. Unique biomes, a mix of sandbox and linear sections, a variety of tools to use in the sandbox, meaning vehicles and various power weapons, and of course the enemy encounter design as well.
And then you have this game, where outside of the very first level and the second last level, almost every single one is copy-paste hallways and rooms with the same gray and blue aesthetic. I hope you weren't expecting there to be like a snow level, or a Covenant ship level, or, I don't know, some kind of human settlement looking level. No, there's only 2 types of zones for 95% of this game, which is huge green landscape, aka, you know, the top side of the ring,
and endless Forerunner gray and blue hallways that at first feels like a nice homage again to the first Halo, then quickly becomes very repetitive when you realize almost every linear level in this game is just copy-pasted rooms over and over again.
If I showed you footage from any of the Inside of the Rings levels, you would not be able to tell which level it's from. They all look the same. And I can only guess the reason for this is because the game had to restart development like once or twice, or was stuck in pre-production for years or whatever, because supposedly this game was in development since 2015, Well, the fact that it lost a creative director tells me that years of development time were wasted. There's no way a game like this takes 6 years, much like a game like Cyberpunk 2077 didn't take 6 years, 7 years, whatever. No, it's evident that they had no idea what to do with this game, and it is a miracle that they slapped together what they did and that it's actually pretty playable and enjoyable. So of course, then we have the other half of the level design, which was executed fairly competently, which is the open world, of course. This is the big selling point for this Halo game, an open world Halo, wow! Well, if you know anything about me, you know I don't really like sandbox games. I like open world RPGs, which this is not one of those. This is much more like a Far Cry, and I already shit on Far Cry this year. I think you already know where I'm going with this. But I may actually disappoint you on this front. I do think that the open world adds to this game. Now, it wasn't handled perfectly. There's way too many repetitive activities of the same 4 or 5, especially the Rescue the Marines one. But overall, I think the open world looks gorgeous. It's fun to traverse around since the grappling hook lets you climb whatever you want, especially when you upgrade its cooldown, which lets you use it so quickly you can scale sheer cliffs. So at least visually and gameplay wise, on the surface it's good. Now again, the activities need work, because pretty much the only things to do are capture forward operating bases, which will let you summon vehicles and summon weapons with your Valor, which you get from doing all the activities in the game. There's skill points, cosmetics for multiplayer, and propaganda towers, which are pretty much all the same type of activity, where you have a thing and then it's surrounded by like 5 to 10 enemies. You just kill them, grab the thing, or destroy the propaganda tower, and then move on. There's also these bounties, which are essentially mini bosses that you fight on the map, and they're just bullet sponge versions of another enemy type. And your reward is a unique variant of a Covenant weapon that, for the most part, it's kind of hard to tell what's different about them. Some of them, like a projectile, will bounce, or maybe another one will have more ammo capacity, but for the most part, it's not a very significant change. But I'm sure for some of you, just playing the game is fun, so a challenging encounter is kind of worth it in and of itself, so fair enough. Then you have the Rescue the Marines activities, which are kind of similar to this last one, except with the added benefit that you can take the Marines with you. I guess that's cool. If you've got a Warthog, you can have them get on the gun and in the passenger seat and then storm some base, which is the next type of activity and probably the only one that really feels worth your time, where you go into some big compound and you have to either destroy all of these energy tanker things or blow up some other thing. And these actually feel like big Far Cry outposts, so they're pretty good, actually. And there's only like a handful of them, so they feel more important. The problem is every other activity I just listed before that gets really repetitive after a few hours. Luckily, you really have no obligation to doing them. You can just do all the story missions and be fine, because outside of the skill points, nothing else in the game really makes you more powerful. Because with Valor, it just lets you summon down slightly better UNSC equipment. And yeah, you really don't need it. I mean, you can find all of this equipment out in the field during these other activities. Valor is really not necessary. So yeah, all in all, they did a decent job, but they also could have done much better. So now that we've talked about gameplay mechanics, enemy types, and the world itself, what's left? Well, the story. And the story fucking sucks. It is horrible. Actually, unbearably bad. You're probably going to think I'm exaggerating, and some of you are probably like, it was fine. It was okay. No, it's shit. Okay, let me explain. So the story begins with Atriox, which if you didn't play Halo Wars 2, you probably don't even know who this guy is. So Atriox just shows up, beats the shit out of Master Chief, and then we flash forward in time, and guess what? Atriox is fucking dead. And for all intents and purposes, he is dead. If you're expecting him to come back over the course of this game, nope. This is a bit of a spoiler, but yeah, he might be in the next one, but he's sure as fuck not in this one. So he's a complete waste of time, which already that's horrible writing. You're gonna have this character beat the shit out of our main character, and then we don't even end up fighting him after we're all powered up? What a fucking tease. Then Master Chief is picked up by Echo 216, and he's an absolutely insufferable character. All he does is complain the entire game. He's a coward, he's a loser, he gets mad at Master Chief multiple times, and I wish Chief just fucking bitch slapped him, because he really deserved it. Or at least deserves some kind of arousing speech to inspire him, because, yeah, Master Chief talks a lot in this game. It wouldn't be out of character for him to give, like, an inspiring speech. He probably has quadruple the lines in this game than any other one in the series. In fact, he probably has more lines in this game than every other game in the series combined. And most of his lines are pretty good, but sometimes he just talks when he doesn't need to talk. And this is one of 343's major mistakes in writing Halo. Master Chief was never supposed to be a character. Bungie themselves said he's just a proxy for the player.
Master Chief is human. He's not a machine. He's not a set of armor with a big weapon. He's a human with resilience.
The success of the story is we didn't pump a lot of time into figuring out who the Master Chief was and why he was a ghost in the shell. We thought he is a husk. He's a big green suit of armor that you move around.
There's something good about having the Master Chief essentially be a blank slate. That helps each individual person connect to the character.
Yeah, sure, he says some snarky one-liners that fit in an 80s movie, but outside of that, he doesn't say anything else. He just says exactly what he should say in a cutscene to get things moving, because he's just supposed to be the perfect soldier. He's not supposed to question things. He's a tool of war, and that's it. And that kind of ties into another problem we get into later, in that 343 writes Halo like it's a bad fan fiction. Like, I would not be surprised if employees at 343 have drawn smut of Master Chief and Cortana, because they seriously have like a romance going on. She's a fucking AI, he can't even have sex with her. But let's just stick with this for now. So, basically, all the UNSC lost to the Banished, which I'm getting some major First Order vibes from this whole thing. I wouldn't be surprised if the morons at 343 really liked The Last Jedi, or really any of the new Star Wars sequels. Because, of course, despite the Covenant being defeated years ago, and the elites allying with the humans, somehow there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of exiled aliens from the Covenant who have formed their own faction, who's just as deadly as the Covenant. And they're led by brutes who are fucking idiots, but sure, whatever. And they beat the UNSC so swiftly and decisively, like it's a bad anime, or like it's bad Star Wars. They took out the UNSC Infinity, which is supposed to be like their biggest flagship, in 4 minutes. This is actual dialogue in the game.
Do you know how long it took us to neutralize your greatest ship? 4 minutes.
And so luckily, during the time skip, which is explained later, the ring is destroyed, and so of course the bad guy's motivation is to fix the ring. So after leaving the ruins of the Infinity, Master Chief has to go to find the weapon. And the weapon is just a clone of Cortana. And they act like this is a plot twist in the story, but I feel like we guessed this immediately. She's basically Cortana if she acted like a very annoying child. I guess she's supposed to be charming, but I found her very annoying, to be honest with you. And of course, this would not be a simple enough story for 343. No, they had to add all this other bullshit that nobody cares about. Like, there's this new alien called the Harbinger. She's never explained at all. Is this another Halo Wars 2 character? Is this like a comic book character? I don't know, and I don't care. They do a horrible job making you interested in her in the game. I just didn't give a shit. And yet she's the real main villain. Then we have Atriox's buddy Escharum, who's the main brute bad guy, and he just monologues over and over again about how he's gonna break the Master Chief's will, and he's all super strong, and they're all carrying Atriox's will with them. I don't even know what the fuck his will was, what his motivation was, because the game doesn't tell you that either. I hope you played Halo Wars 2! And of course, then we have a lingering plotline from Halo 5, because evil Cortana is still a plot point in this game, and it is by far the worst part of the game. So this is where I'm going to go into major spoiler territory, so if you haven't played the game, skip to this part to get to the conclusion of the video. So you fight your way through the game, you stop the Banished from fixing the ring, you defeat Escharum, which unfortunately doesn't stop the Banished at all. So finally, at the end of the game, you go after the Harbinger, and she's trying to revive the Endless, whatever they are, who are supposed to be even more dangerous than the Flood, which is fucking stupid. Again, bad writing. And this site, apparently, is where the weapon trapped Cortana and she died. Except, that's not really what happened. What really happened is Atriox is so badass that he beat Cortana's undefeatable robot guardian forces or whatever. And so Cortana suddenly becomes a good guy again after having the same motivation as Maester Seymour from Final Fantasy X, wanting to basically kill everybody so that there's no suffering in the world anymore. What the fuck kind of shitty writing is that? I mean, are you fucking serious? This is what 343 thinks Halo is about? God, if they could have just retconned that whole thing, they should have. Don't even acknowledge it again. The fact that Cortana becomes the most important character in the Halo universe. How fucking disappointing and terrible is that? All to basically have a pseudo love story with Master Chief. Because that's what we all wanted from Halo, a fucking love story. But after we were literally told that she convinced a dude to blow up the Spartan 4 training facility, basically killing almost every other one left in existence, and apparently the Banished basically killed the rest right at the beginning of this game. So Master Chief is the last Spartan. Yeah, that's great. Cortana just suddenly decides, I'm a good guy now, and then blows up the ring. Because 343 only knows how to write two types of characters, Mary Sue's and extremely flawed, annoying people like Echo 216. Because seriously, every major character is a Mary Sue or Gary Stu. Atriox, Master Chief, Cortana, even like Escharum and the Harbinger seem to lack any notable flaws. Though the Harbinger doesn't even have a character, let's be real. This is fucking amateur hour, dude. What the hell happened to writing in video games? This is why I said in my last video that I don't care about stories in video games anymore, because they're all shit. Go read a fucking book if you want a real story. At the very least, raise your standards. This is awful, dude. And so you get into this final fight, and the Harbinger, I guess she's trying to, like, revive her race, the Endless, or whatever. I don't even know. And the big twist is, the secret of this ring is that it has the ability to travel you through time. And so Master Chief is sent 3 days into the future, and in the end credits scene, we see Atriox is still alive. Obviously, he was sent into the future right before the ring blew up. Fuck this story. It's fucking garbage. So, you're probably expecting me to talk about multiplayer right now. Well, honestly, I don't have that much to say other than I had a pretty good time playing it. I do have some complaints, but they're complaints you pretty much heard from everyone else, which is there's not enough maps, there's not enough modes, but that's easily the biggest problem. There's only like 3 modes and then they rotate in another one every once in a while. Really? This is Halo, the series known for game modes. And also, controller has way too much aim assist. Every time I play now, I plug in a controller because that shit just glues onto your enemy. Just move in their general direction and shoot. Also, the vehicles don't have enough health. But other than that, it's pretty damn fun. You can have a good time. The problem is, with so few maps and modes, it does get repetitive fairly quickly. But I'd say they did a good job with the multiplayer for the most part. Again, it's just suffering from what the rest of this game suffers from, that obviously they restarted development at some point, and they didn't have nearly enough content ready for release. Hundreds of millions of dollars were wasted on this game. I wish we could see a documentary someday of the game's development, but I doubt we will.
It's working. We got it, we got it, we got it.
Oh my god.
We got it.
Yes! 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 Also, I just want to add this really quick. I know some of you don't care about this, but the Halo soundtracks is some of the best of all time. Marty O'Donnell obviously is a legend, and Michael Salvatore is also pretty great. He helped compose a lot of the songs, so I want to give him credit as well. Obviously, nobody at 343 has nearly that level of talent, because there's not a single good original track in Halo Infinite. Every good part of its soundtrack is just a leitmotif of earlier songs in the series, and even then they were pretty conservative about it, which is highly disappointing. The music reminds me a lot of Breath of the Wild in that it's just way too subdued, and they thought that was a good idea just because it's an open world game. I would much rather just have the music kick in heavy combat, and then have the quiet be everything in between, than this weird, like, ambient, barely present music that you almost never notice. It sucks. It really sucks. Is music in games such a low priority at this point that you can't just hire someone willing to have, I don't know, just some kind of original idea with the music in Halo? I mean, just try anything. That would be better than recycling the same music for years. But yeah, I won't dwell any longer on this, because again, I know a lot of people don't care about soundtracks in games, but I do. It's just another element that was disappointing. So, in conclusion, should you buy Halo Infinite? Not at full price, I'm gonna be honest with you. Because the multiplayer is free, so you're paying $60 for maybe a 15-hour campaign, but you're probably not gonna do that many open world activities. You're probably gonna get bored like I did and just move through the story. And unfortunately, the campaign levels just really aren't that good, and the story might be the worst in the series. So you're really just playing for the core gameplay mechanics, which are really good, but overall, it's just a decent game. I find it laughable that so many Xbox fanboys voted this Game of the Year. And what do we have as the final package? Maybe the best 343 Halo, but that's really not saying much. At least I didn't have high expectations for it. I guess there could have been worse ways to close out the year. Now it's time for the best and worst of 2021. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Do the things the algorithm likes. And thank you to my patrons. It makes blowing $60 on games not feel like such a waste of money. And I think I'm probably going to throw my top 10 overrated games audio up on Patreon, because I'm really just not going to finish that video anytime soon, because I'm honestly getting worn out making all these videos. So I'm probably going to take a week off, and then next is going to be the best and worst of 2021. Yeah, I don't know. I'll probably stream a few times in between there. That's pretty much it. I'll see you next time, guys.